They threw a $20 bill at my face like I was some kind of beggar. The crisp bill floated down to the marble floor of the penthouse lobby, while the woman in her designer heels clicked her tongue in disgust. "Next time, use the service elevator," she hissed, not even looking at me as she strutted toward the golden doors that I wasn't allowed to use. "My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 28 years old, and until 6 months ago, I was just another invisible delivery guy on the streets of Manhattan. Every day I'd weave through traffic on my motorcycle, carrying other people's luxuries to buildings I'd never be able to afford even a closet in. But here's the thing about being invisible. You see everything, and people forget you're listening." I bent down to pick up that 20, my delivery uniform soaked from the December rain outside. The security guard, Marcus, an older black man who'd always treated me with respect, shook his head apologetically. "Sorry about Mrs. Henderson, kid. She's having a rough day. Her husband's firm is under investigation." That's when I heard it, the conversation that would change everything. 2 men in expensive suits were standing by the mailboxes, speaking in hushed tones. One of them was Richard Blackstone, the building owner. I'd delivered to his office countless times. The other was a man I didn't recognize, but his nervous fidgeting told me everything I needed to know. "The SEC is breathing down our necks," the stranger whispered. "If they find those documents—" "They won't," Blackstone interrupted. "Henderson's wife already cleaned out his office. Everything's been moved to the storage unit in Queens, Unit 247. I froze, pretending to organize my delivery bag. Storage Unit 247 in Queens. I made mental note of every word. "Hey, if you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop a comment and tell me what city you're from. I love connecting with viewers globally. And if you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button because you won't believe where this goes next." The stranger nodded nervously. "And the whistleblower?" "Being handled. Money talks louder than conscience." Blackstone's laugh was cold. "Speaking of which, that delivery boy better not have heard anything." They both looked at me. I kept my head down, zipping up my bag with shaking hands. To them, I was just another piece of furniture, another nobody who didn't matter. But they were wrong. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in an FBI field office in Lower Manhattan, my motorcycle helmet on the table between me and Agent Sarah Collins. She was a sharp woman in her 40s, with the kind of eyes that missed nothing. "You're sure about what you heard, Mr. Carter?" I nodded, sliding a piece of paper across the table. "Storage Unit 247, Queens Self-Storage on Northern Boulevard. And there's more." Over the past weeks, I'd been paying attention. Really paying attention. Every delivery to Blackstone Tower became a reconnaissance mission. I documented times, photographed license plates, recorded conversations on my phone. Mrs. Henderson's rough day wasn't just about her husband's legal troubles. She was actively helping destroy evidence. Agent Collins studied my notes, her eyebrows rising with each page. "This is comprehensive. Why come forward now?" I thought about that $20 bill hitting my face, about every sneer, every dismissive wave, every time I'd been treated like I was less than human just because I wore a delivery uniform. Because they think people like me don't matter. They think we're invisible, that we don't have opinions, that we can't fight back. I leaned forward. They're about to learn how wrong they are. The raid happened on a Tuesday morning. I watched from across the street as FBI agents swarmed Blackstone Tower, their black SUVs surrounding the building like hunting wolves. Through my binoculars, I could see the panic on familiar faces. Residents who'd looked right through me for years now scrambling to shred documents and delete files, but it was too late. The storage unit had yielded exactly what Agent Collins needed: financial records showing money laundering operations worth over $50 million, all orchestrated through the building's management company. Henderson wasn't just another corrupt finance guy. He was the tip of an iceberg that went deep into Manhattan's real estate underworld. My phone buzzed. Agent Collins. "We got them, Ethan. All of them. Henderson, his wife, 3 board members, and Blackstone himself. You did this." I watched as Richard Blackstone was led out in handcuffs, his perfectly styled hair disheveled, his $1,000 suit wrinkled. For just a moment, our eyes met across the street. The recognition was instant and terrifying. But I wasn't afraid anymore. 2 days later, I got a call that would change my life forever. James Morrison, head of security for Meridian Properties, Blackstone's biggest competitor, wanted to meet. "Ethan," he said over coffee in a downtown cafe, What you did took courage, real courage, and it got me thinking, we need someone like you on our team, someone who knows the streets, who people trust, who can see what others miss. He slid a business card across the table. Head of Building Security, Meridian East Side. Salary starts at $85K, full benefits, company apartment. You'd be responsible for screening tenants, managing access, overseeing all building operations. I stared at the card, my hands trembling slightly. From invisible delivery guy to head of security in one of Manhattan's most exclusive buildings. The irony wasn't lost on me. There's just one thing, Morrison continued. The building you'd be managing. It's going up right where Blackstone Tower used to be. We're buying it at auction next week. I looked up at him, a slow smile spreading across my face. When do I start? The keys felt heavy in my hand as I stood in front of the building that used to be my personal hell. 6 months had passed since the FBI raid, and now the brass nameplate next to the entrance read Meridian East Side instead of Blackstone Tower. But what had really changed was the man holding those keys. I'm Ethan Carter, and I'm no longer the guy people throw money at and dismiss. I'm the guy who decides whether you get to come inside. The renovation had been extensive, but Morrison kept some of the original marble flooring. A reminder, he said, of how quickly fortunes can change. My office was on the ground floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that gave me a perfect view of the street where I used to park my motorcycle between deliveries. My first day was a Tuesday, the same day of the week when everything had started to fall apart for Blackstone. Poetic justice, I thought, as I reviewed the tenant applications spread across my mahogany desk. That's when she walked in, Victoria Henderson, still beautiful, still wearing designer clothes, but the arrogance was gone. In its place was something I'd never seen before, desperation. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice steady, but her hands shaking slightly. "I'd like to apply for an apartment." I leaned back in my leather chair, studying her face. 6 months ago, she'd thrown money at me like I was garbage. Now she needed my approval to have a roof over her head. "Mrs. Henderson," I said calmly, pulling out her file. "I see your husband is currently serving a 12-year sentence for money laundering and fraud. Your assets have been frozen by the federal government, and you're currently living in a women's shelter in Queens." Her perfectly composed mask cracked slightly. That's correct. Our application requires 3 references from previous landlords, proof of income at least 3 times the monthly rent, and a credit score above 700. I looked up at her. "Do you meet these requirements?" The silence stretched between us. We both knew the answer. I could offer additional security deposit," she whispered. "I have some jewelry I could sell." I remembered that $20 bill floating to the floor. The contempt in her voice when she told me to use the service elevator. The way she'd looked right through me like I didn't exist. But I also remembered something my mother taught me when I was young. Power isn't about revenge, Ethan. It's about doing what's right even when no one's watching. I pulled out a different form. There's a subsidized housing program for people in transitional situations. The apartments are smaller, but they're dignified, clean, safe. Would you be interested? Her eyes filled with tears. "Why would you help me after how I treated you?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where my motorcycle used to be parked. "Because everyone deserves a second chance, Mrs. Henderson, even people who forget that delivery guys have opinions." She got the apartment, a modest 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor, with a view of the courtyard instead of the street. But it was hers, and it was a start. Word spread quickly through Manhattan's social circles. The former delivery guy who'd brought down Blackstone Tower was now the gatekeeper of one of the city's most prestigious buildings. Some people were terrified of me. Others were curious. A few were genuinely respectful. But the real test came 3 weeks later. Marcus, the security guard who'd always treated me with kindness, showed up at my office. He looked older, more tired, and I could see the worry lines around his eyes. "Ethan," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk, "I need to ask you for a favor." "What's going on, Marcus?" I'd always liked him. He was one of the few people in the old building who'd seen me as human. "My grandson, Tyler, he's 15, been getting into trouble with the wrong crowd in the Bronx. His mother, my daughter, she's working 3 jobs just to keep food on the table." Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "She called me last night, crying. Says she's afraid he's going to end up dead or in prison if something doesn't change." I leaned forward. "What do you need?" There's a mentorship program here in Manhattan. Good kids from tough situations get paired with successful professionals. But Tyler, he doesn't trust authority figures, especially not after what happened with his father. Marcus looked directly at me. But he might listen to someone who came from where he's coming from. Someone who knows what it's like to be invisible. That afternoon, I met Tyler Washington in a coffee shop near his school. He was skinny, suspicious, wearing a hoodie that was too big for him, and attitude that was exactly the right size for a kid who'd been disappointed by adults his whole life. "So you're the dude who took down those rich people," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I'm the guy who paid attention when everyone thought I wasn't listening," I corrected. "Tell me about yourself, Tyler," he shrugged. "Nothing to tell, I'm nobody. Just another black kid from the Bronx that nobody cares about." I felt something twist in my chest. "You know what I used to do for a living? Deliver food or whatever. I was invisible," I said. "Every day I'd go into buildings full of successful people, and they'd look right through me. They'd throw money at me, dismiss me, treat me like furniture. You know why?" Tyler finally looked up. "Because you were poor? Because I let them convince me I was nobody." I leaned forward. "But here's what I learned. Being underestimated is actually a superpower. While they're ignoring you, you're learning. You're watching. You're getting stronger." Over the next month, Tyler started coming by the building after school. At first, he just sat in the lobby doing homework while I worked. But gradually, he started asking questions about business, about respect, about how to turn anger into motivation instead of destruction. "Why'd you help my grandfather keep his job?" he asked one afternoon. "When the new owners took over, they fired most of the old staff." I looked up from the tenant applications I was reviewing. "Because loyalty matters, Tyler. Your grandfather treated me with dignity when nobody else would. That's worth more than any salary." But Tyler was sharp. Sharper than I'd given him credit for. "That's not the whole reason," he said, studying my face. "You kept him because you needed someone you could trust. Someone who knew the building, knew the people. Someone who had your back." I smiled. The kid was going to be just fine. That evening, as I locked up the building, I thought about the strange turns life takes. 6 months ago, I was dodging traffic on a motorcycle, delivering other people's dreams. Now I was the guardian of those dreams, the person who decided who got to enter this world of marble floors and golden elevators. My phone buzzed. A text from Agent Collins. "Blackstone's appeals were denied. He's looking at 25 to life. Thought you'd want to know." I looked up at the building that now bore my responsibility. Tomorrow there would be more applications to review, more decisions to make, more lives to impact. The power was intoxicating, but it was also terrifying. Because now I understood something that Richard Blackstone never did. Real power isn't about who you can keep out. It's about who you choose to let in. If you're still with me on this journey, I'd love to know. Have you ever been underestimated because of your job or background? Drop a comment and share your story. And don't forget to hit that like button if you're enjoying how this unfolds. The knock on my office door came at 8:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I should have been home hours ago, but the stack of applications on my desk seemed to grow faster than I could process them. Meridian East Side had become the most sought-after address in Manhattan, and everyone wanted in. "Come in," I called, not looking up from the background check I was reviewing. The man who entered wasn't what I expected. Mid-40s, wearing an expensive suit, but with the kind of nervous energy that money can't buy away. He closed the door behind him and took a seat without being invited. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice smooth but with an undertone that made my instincts prickle. "My name is Vincent Romano. I represent certain interested parties." I set down the file and really looked at him for the first time. Everything about him screamed money and danger in equal measure, the kind of man who made problems disappear. "I don't take meetings without appointments, Mr. Romano." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I think you'll want to make an exception. I'm here about apartment 23C. 23C was the penthouse, the crown jewel of the building, with panoramic views of Central Park and a price tag that could buy a house in most American cities. It had been empty since we opened, mainly because finding someone who could afford it and pass our screening process was nearly impossible. "What about it?" Romano reached into his jacket, slowly showing me his hands, and pulled out an envelope. He slid it across my desk. "My client is very interested in that unit. He's prepared to pay the full year's rent up front in cash, plus a substantial finder's fee for the right person. I didn't touch the envelope, but I could see it was thick, very thick. Who's your client? Someone who values privacy. Someone who's had some unfortunate misunderstandings with federal agencies, but who's completely legitimate now. Romano's smile widened. Someone who remembers when you were just a delivery boy and appreciates how far you've come. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. This wasn't just about money. This was about my past, about the case that brought down Blackstone, about connections I thought had been severed. I'm going to have to ask you to leave, Mr. Romano. He didn't move. That would be unwise. You see, my client has information about certain irregularities in how you obtained your current position, about conversations you may have overheard that weren't entirely legal to record, about evidence that may have been gathered through questionable means. My blood turned to ice. He was talking about the recordings I'd made with my phone, the photographs I'd taken without permission, the way I'd essentially spied on building residents to build my case against Blackstone. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you an opportunity, Mr. Carter. Take the money, approve the application, and continue living your comfortable new life. Or don't, and find yourself explaining to federal prosecutors why a delivery boy suddenly became an expert at evidence collection. The envelope sat between us like a bomb waiting to explode. Inside my head I could hear my mother's voice again. Power isn't about revenge, Ethan. It's about doing what's right, even when no one's watching. But now someone was watching, and the stakes were higher than they'd ever been. I need time to think about it, I said finally. Romano stood up, straightening his tie. 24 hours, Mr. Carter. My client is not a patient man. After he left, I sat in my office staring at that envelope until the numbers on my desk clock blurred together. Everything I'd built, everything I'd become, suddenly felt as fragile as a house of cards in a hurricane. I called Agent Collins. Ethan, it's late. What's wrong? I told her everything. About Romano, about the threats, about the apartment application that felt more like extortion than business. Vincent Romano, she repeated thoughtfully. We know that name. He's connected to the Torino family. Money laundering, racketeering, but he's slippery. Never been able to make anything stick. So what do I do? You do exactly what you've been doing, Ethan. You follow your conscience. But my conscience was at war with my survival instincts, and both were losing to my fear. The next morning, Tyler was waiting for me in the lobby. He'd been coming by every day for 2 months now, and I'd watched him transform from an angry kid into a young man with purpose. He'd brought his grades up, stayed out of trouble, even started talking about college. You look like hell, Mr. Carter, he said, as I walked past the front desk. Thanks, Tyler, really what I needed to hear. He followed me to my office, closing the door behind him. Something's wrong, I can tell. You've been good to me, so I'm going to be straight with you. There was a guy here yesterday asking questions about you. My heart stopped. What kind of questions? About how you got your job, about the FBI thing, about whether you had any family, any weaknesses. Tyler's young face was serious beyond his years. I didn't tell him nothing, but he wasn't the kind of guy who gives up easy. Romano wasn't just threatening me. He was investigating me, looking for pressure points. That meant this was bigger than one apartment application. I spent the day reviewing the file Romano had left. His client was listed as David Torino, a name that made my blood run cold when I looked him up. 3 federal investigations, 2 trials that ended in mistrials due to witness intimidation, and a reputation for making problems disappear permanently. The apartment application was perfect. Too perfect. References from landlords who probably didn't exist. Bank statements that were likely forgeries. A credit report that had obviously been manufactured. If I approved it, I'd be helping a known criminal establish a base of operations in the heart of Manhattan. If I denied it. My phone rang at exactly 8:47 p.m. Have you made your decision, Mr. Carter? I have questions about the application, I said carefully. Some of the references seem... I'm disappointed, Ethan. I really hoped we could do this the easy way. The line went dead. 30 minutes later, my world started to collapse. The first call was from Morrison, my boss. Ethan, I just got a very disturbing call from someone claiming to have evidence that you falsified information during your hiring process. They're saying you have connections to organized crime, that your testimony in the Blackstone case was compromised. James, that's not... I know it's not true, but I have to follow protocol. You're suspended pending investigation. The second call was from Agent Collins. "Ethan, someone just filed a complaint with the FBI claiming you were working with criminal elements during the Blackstone investigation. It's obviously fabricated, but I have to recuse myself from your case due to conflict of interest." The third call was from Marcus. "Tyler's in the hospital," he said, his voice shaking. "Someone grabbed him after school, roughed him up pretty bad. The doctors say he'll be okay, but Ethan, they left a message, said this was just a warning." I sat in my office, surrounded by everything I'd built, watching it crumble around me. Romano had played his hand perfectly. Destroy my reputation, isolate me from my allies, and hurt the people I cared about. The envelope was still on my desk. I thought about Tyler in that hospital bed, about Marcus crying on the phone, about Victoria Henderson, who'd found dignity again in her small apartment, about all the people who depended on this building, on the decisions I made every day. Then I thought about my mother's voice. It's about doing what's right, even when no one's watching. But people were watching now, and they were waiting to see what kind of man I really was. I picked up the envelope, feeling its weight in my hands. Inside was more money than I'd ever seen in one place, enough to disappear, to start over somewhere else, to buy my way out of this nightmare. Instead, I walked to my office shredder and fed the envelope through it, bills and all. Then I picked up my phone and called the one person who could end this. "Romano, this is Ethan Carter. We need to meet." An hour later, I was standing in the same spot where Victoria Henderson had once thrown money at my feet, but this time I wasn't the one on my knees. Romano entered through the main lobby, flanked by two men who looked like they bench-pressed small cars for fun. But I wasn't alone either. Agent Collins had managed to get authorization for an emergency surveillance operation, and I knew there were FBI agents positioned throughout the building. "Mr. Carter," Romano said, looking around at the marble and gold that had once represented everything I couldn't have, "I hope you've reconsidered your position." "I have," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through my veins. "I'm denying your client's application. His references don't check out. His financial information appears to be falsified, and frankly, his representative has engaged in criminal intimidation." Romano's pleasant mask slipped completely. "That's a very expensive mistake, Mr. Carter." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." I looked him directly in the eyes. "You see, 6 months ago, I would have taken that money. I would have been so grateful to be noticed, to be included, that I would have sold my soul for a taste of power." I gestured around the lobby, at the building that had become my kingdom and my responsibility. "But power isn't about who you can intimidate or how much money you can throw around. Real power is about standing up when standing up matters, even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared." Romano stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You have no idea who you're crossing." "Yes, I do," I said. "I'm crossing the same kind of people who used to throw money at me and tell me I didn't matter. The same kind of people who think that because someone delivers food or mops floors or works security, their opinions don't count." I could see the FBI agents moving into position in my peripheral vision. "But here's what you never understood, Romano. The people you dismiss, the people you think are invisible, we're everywhere. We're watching, we're listening, and we remember everything." I raised my voice slightly. The signal Agent Collins and I had agreed on, including this conversation, which is being recorded by federal agents who are currently surrounding this building. The takedown was swift and professional. Romano and his associates were in handcuffs within minutes, and by morning David Torino was in federal custody, along with 12 other members of his organization. The surveillance equipment in my building had captured enough evidence to put them away for decades, but the real victory came 3 days later, when Tyler walked into my office with his arm in a sling but a smile on his face. "My grandfather says you saved us," he said. "Says you could have taken the easy way out but chose to fight instead." I looked at this remarkable young man who taught me as much about courage as I'd taught him about opportunity. "We saved each other, Tyler. That's what family does." "Family? You think I went through all this just for some strangers?" I smiled. "This building isn't just about apartments and rent checks. It's about people. It's about giving everyone, delivery guys, security guards, kids from the Bronx, even women who've lost everything, a chance to prove they're more than what others think they are." 6 months later, I was standing in the same lobby where my story began, but everything had changed. Tyler had been accepted to Columbia with a full scholarship. Victoria Henderson had gotten a job at a non-profit, helping other families affected by white-collar crime. Marcus had been promoted to head of security for all Meridian properties. And me. I was still the guy who decided who came in and who didn't. But now I understood that the real power wasn't in keeping people out. It was in helping them find their way in. The brass nameplate next to the entrance still read, Meridian East Side. But everyone who worked there, everyone who lived there knew the truth. This wasn't just a building. It was proof that sometimes the people they tell you don't matter are the ones who matter most of all. They told me delivery guys don't get to have opinions. They were wrong about that, just like they were wrong about everything else. Because now I'm not just the one who decides who comes in and who doesn't. I'm the one who makes sure everyone gets a chance to prove they belong. Thanks for joining me on this incredible journey from invisible delivery guy to building manager to someone who learned that real power comes from lifting others up, not keeping them down. If this story resonated with you, smash that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what your biggest takeaway was. Remember, you're never as powerless as others want you to believe.